What's going on? Matt Savoca here from Awesemo.com, bringing you the Week 18 Saturday Night Football Contenders video for DraftKings. This should be an interesting two-game slate, an exciting two-game slate here, with the Chiefs facing off against the Denver Broncos in an AFC West battle, followed by the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles in a battle of two NFC East playoff teams who are really only playing for seeding, and really only the Dallas Cowboys here. The Eagles are essentially locked in here. Before I get into the full analysis of the best players on this slate, just want to remind you guys, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you always know when we're going live. You guys know what to do. And if you could give me, Matt Savoca, a follow on Twitter at Draftaholic, that would be much appreciated as well. We'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is offering player props contests for all major sports. You can mix and match sports. They even have niche sports. If you have a niche sport knowledge, get in on Prize Picks today because you can utilize that knowledge for cash. They've got power plays where you got to win them all to 2x, 3x, even 5x your money. And there are some where you just got to win a couple, get a couple right of your bet in order to 1.5 or 2x your money. They have all sorts of contests. And if you go to awesemo.com/prizepicks-promo, you can get a month free of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up for Prize Picks. Take advantage of that today. Okay, guys, on the screen here, you will see my 10 through 6 of my top plays for this two-game slate. At number 10, with a 34% chance of being in the optimal lineup, it's Courtland Sutton, who was meh in a game where he could have been utilized even more with Jerry Jeudy and others on the COVID-19 list, but still looking healthier in the optimal lineup a third of the time. Can't be ignored on this slate with not a ton of wide receivers. Then the Cowboys defense, a turnover-making machine this season in the optimal lineup, 38% of the time. That looks particularly good if their starters play and the Eagles don't. I actually don't think that's the most likely outcome here. Nonetheless, they're in the optimal lineup 38% of the time, which is the same as Boston Scott, the presumed starting running back at this point. We might see Jordan Howard. We know Jalen Hurts is going to run, but Boston Scott has had some huge games here. So he's in the optimal lineup a decent amount, not as much though as his teammate Devontae Smith. Again, we don't have a ton of great wide receivers outside of the Dallas Cowboys, of course, but Devonta Smith, whose target volatility is his only annoyance, he's in the optimal lineup 40% of the time. Then there's Patrick Mahomes. Salary really matters here. He's still in the optimal lineup 45% of the time, but he doesn't crack the top 5 because that $7,500 salary on this two-game slate is really tough to get to on DraftKings. On FanDuel, if you look for this video, the FanDuel version on the channel, you'll see that he's ranked higher here, but I understand it from a salary-based standpoint still. Patrick Mahomes, over 30 fantasy points, gets into the optimal lineup a solid amount, doesn't quite crack the top 5. Who does? Let's watch and find out. At number 5, it's the Chiefs defense. And yeah, we're going to look at a defense who has a median projection of nearly 9 fantasy points and a salary of 3,100 as a solid value here. But I don't think the ceiling is stupendously high. You could always see Drew Lock get picked multiple times. Maybe a pick 6 happens here, but the Chiefs aren't some elite defensive unit. While they're better than they were earlier in the season, they're up to 12th best in the NFL in points allowed per play, and they're better than league average in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing offenses. They're bottom 10 in yards allowed per pass attempt, bottom 8 in yards allowed per carry, so they are scoring less than 10 fantasy points in 57% of our latest simulations, even though this Chiefs team is a 10.5 point favorite. Yeah, I don't think they're going to have any problem with Denver, but I don't necessarily know if the way that they roll over Denver is because this defense has some sort of elite turnover happy game. I do know that the salary and the projection compared to that salary looks solid enough. That's why they're in the optimal lineup more than Patrick Mahomes, 46% of the time. At number 4, it's Ezekiel Elliott, and I'll be honest, this one scares me. And I understand why in our tools and our simulations, it's popping, right? Because Ezekiel Elliott is 6th in the NFL in total carries. He's 8th in the NFL in total targets, 6th in weighted opportunities, 5th in red zone touches, 7th in rush yards. It hasn't been a bad season for Ezekiel Elliott, and you're talking about a team in the Cowboys who are 7-point favorites, have a top 5 PFF team offensive grade, and you want to play running backs on teams who are in that situation, and yet Elliott had only 11 total opportunities last week, 10 opportunities the week before that. It feels like a far cry from the 19 opportunities he had in week 15. Still, Ezekiel Elliott is a solid combination of floor and ceiling in the optimal lineup nearly 51% of the time. Nearly 10% of the time, he's scoring over 30 fantasy points. I just don't know if I really see that here. I understand that's in his range of outcomes, but I just don't know how he gets to that score here. I think I'm fine playing him in cash games. It's pretty easy to play him in cash games, but in tournaments, I'm probably fading Elliott still. Showing up in the optimal lineup, coin flips chance, 51% of the time. Number 3, it's Travis Kelce. And while he didn't have as spectacular of a game as he had in week 15 against the Chargers, in week 17, after a 1-week absence on the COVID-19 list, Kelce had 5 receptions, 25 receiving yards, found the end zone, found his way to a dozen fantasy points as he often does. But we know the ceiling is more like week 15, where he had over 40 fantasy points, over 50 DraftKings fantasy points to be exact. That's why you're seeing him score over 30 fantasy points in 16% of our latest simulations here. This Denver team is solid as a full defensive unit, but they haven't been particularly great against tight ends this season. They are pretty good against the pass, but they're better against the run. So I do think that Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and of course that other pass catcher who we might mention in a few picks here had awesome ceilings. Still, volatility of the position tells us he's going to get under 10 fantasy points between 30 and 40% of the time. That's what we're seeing. Still, the offensive advantage over the Denver defense should be prevalent here. He's in the optimal lineup just ahead of Ezekiel Elliott, almost 51.5% of the time. Number 2, it's Dallas Goedert. And I think this is surprising to see him this high ahead of Travis Kelce. We now have 2 tight ends on this slate, at least for DraftKings, who have a greater than 50% chance of being in the optimal lineup, a 60% chance, in fact, for Goedert to be in the optimal lineup. And while the ceiling isn't the same as Travis Kelce, I mean, look at it. It's a 3% chance of Goedert being a 30-point scorer or more, and a 36 to 40% chance of him being a 10-point scorer or less. But it's that median projection, 12.4 points, compared to a salary-based expectation at 5,200, that he can easily succeed here. 7 targets last week. 2 weeks ago, he had 9 targets, and he caught 7 of those passes for 135 yards. In fact, in weeks 13 and 15, remember the Eagles had a bye in week 14, he had 240 total receiving yards here. So yeah, he could absolutely get to that ceiling despite his range of outcomes not looking quite as good as Kelce. That makes a lot of sense here. Still, the salary saving you get, maybe this is a 2 tight end week, you can absolutely do it on a 2-game slate here. Goedert in the optimal lineup an impressive 60% of the time. Now, before I get into my number 1 play on DraftKings for this Saturday night football slate, just want to remind you guys one more time, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you always know when we're going live. You guys know what to do. And if you could give me, Matt Savoca, a follow on Twitter at Draftaholic, that would be much appreciated as well. We'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, Prize Picks, one more time. That app is so much fun, and make sure to go to awesemo.com/prizepicks-promo. You can get a month free of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up for Prize Picks today. Do not miss this promo, guys. And at number 1, it's Tyreek Hill. We are leaning into the Kansas City passing attack. They have the most to play for of these 4 teams here in terms of seeding, and so we think that the matchup is the best as well. Why not just lean into these Kansas City premier options? In large field tournaments, you can take shots at the other players, the auxiliary weapons, but I think you want to lean on Tyreek Hill nonetheless. 5th in the NFL in targets, 3rd in total air yards, 11th in air yard share, 6th in completed air yards, and 6th in fantasy points per game among wide receivers this season. The production has been a little bit volatile, but that's Tyreek Hill for you. 40 receiving yards last week, just 19 the week before that. But the week before that, he had 148 receiving yards on just 95 air yards. Still the same explosive ceiling that we know week in and week out for Tyreek Hill. Despite the matchup not being perfect, he's still getting to 30 fantasy points in nearly 25% of our simulations. And while he does have the volatility I talked about, he's under 10 fantasy points in 28% of our sims. I don't really think that's happening here. At least the median score, 18 DraftKings points or higher, I think is much more likely here. Tyreek Hill shows up in the optimal lineup 72.6% of the time. And that is gonna do it for the week 18 Saturday Night Football DraftKings contenders video. If you're looking for the FanDuel version of this video, go ahead and look for it on the channel. It's around here somewhere. We will be back tomorrow with the main slate contenders video, the last main slate video of the regular season. Oh man, this season has flown by. I have enjoyed doing these videos for you guys. Until then, I'm Matt Savoca from Awesemo.com. We'll see you guys next time.